Yeah, no, it's been a bit of a heck. I leave for South Africa on Thursday. And so
Oh,
literally an
nice.
hour ago, I had like the biggest beard I've ever had in my life. And my wife told me, I think you need to shave your beard to be a little bit more professional looking when you get down to South Africa. So I was like, all right, fine. I will shave.
Nice.
And then we heard the Minister of the Environment out of Canada this morning declared that Canada is making stricter legal provisions or regulations around the import of elephant tusk and rhino horn into Canada. Now, for the most people listening to this, and maybe you too, it's like, well, isn't that a good thing? Yeah, of course, it's a good thing. Yeah. That's why we have a organization called CITES, which is the Convention for International Trade of Endangered Species, and they regulate permitting and all that kind of good stuff. But the Canadian Environment Minister, and I don't think it even went through Parliament. I think the minister just decided to make a random, like, I'm going to increase regulations, tighten regulations. And they go through all the things that affect elephants and rhinos in terms of their population. Human infrastructure development, human wildlife conflict, poaching, deforestation. Doesn't mention hunting, which is good. Yet the regulation that they're putting in place is going to cease the import of regulated trophies through hunting.
And that's the reason why you're going on the trip?
No. This is aside. The reason I'm going on the trip is to go to the annual general meetings of a bunch of professional hunting associations down in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. But it's like, if you knew, here are all the things that are causing demise. Why would you not tackle any of those things through your regulations?
Right.
Versus the thing that's actually saving rhinos. So a lot of people wouldn't know this, but the vast majority of rhinos that are in existence today in South Africa specifically are on private reserves that are hunted. Because they have the resources to protect them. Poaching is rampant, and they are highly, highly militarized. Thermals, dart guns now. They don't even use guns anymore. Helicopters, you name it, just to get rhino horn, because it's probably the most expensive commodity by weight in the world today.
Yeah, I have a friend actually, Blake Moynes, who actually did the training to be a ranger for protecting rhinos and for protecting against poachers. And it's an intense training program because poachers have so much, just a lot of access to things. It's like a huge organization. It's bigger than we can imagine. The people who are actually participating in poaching aren't necessarily, I don't want to say the bad guys, but they do it because they are doing it to survive. And there's organizations behind them that are kind of like getting them to do it. It's almost kind of like a mob, not mob. What is it? Yeah, syndicates. I guess it is kind of like
syndicates.
Yeah. So 100%. I have that's kind of what I know about poaching, is just through some of my friends who are a part of trying to prevent that happening in Africa right now.
Yeah, it's a major, major issue. And look, don't get me wrong. I think to stop all those things that the Canadian government said they wanted to stop is a very laudable goal. Like, that's what we all want. But why target the thing that is saving them the most right now? And I think that's just probably the problem with the hunting narrative, is that we have not told that story. I don't think
it is tricky because I think people approach it more with emotion. And I know that I was somebody initially that did that as well, because I love nature, I love wildlife, and I love animals. And I think the first thing you think about is, why would you want to promote killing them if you love them so much? And I collect taxidermy, so I've kind of had a lot of people come at me because of that, saying, you love animals, but it's disgusting or gross to collect things like taxidermy because they are trophies or they were killed for certain reasons. But I think that is what prompted me to research a little bit more about hunting and why people hunt and the conservation behind hunting, and to understand it more myself. Because I used to be pescatarian, like I used to not eat meat. And I told myself that if I ever did eat meat again, I would have to hunt to like understand what it is to take a life. And since moving to Germany, I have started eating meat again more regularly, like every day. And that's something that I never thought I would do. So when I told myself I'd have to hunt if I started doing that, I did that thinking I would never do it. And so now that I am, I'm like, man, I have to, I think it's an important thing to do if you do eat meat, to kind of understand where it comes from.
Well, Kendall Long, welcome to the Blood Origins podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to talk to you because this is something that I've researched a little bit, like hunting, and I don't know enough about it. And so I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate the willingness for you to come on. This is a cold DM that I sent you over Instagram. We don't follow each other. Well, I follow you now. Hopefully you'll follow us.
Oh gosh, now to follow you. Yeah, we've officially met in our video call. So,
but the reason why I reached out to you was, well, before I do that, why don't you give just a background to who you are, what you do? You got a big Instagram following, so yes. I'm curious to how you got such a big Instagram following.
It's not as impressive. I wish it was, just because. Well, so first of all, my social media is all about zoology, botany, like science education. And I just have a curious mind, and I love telling stories that spark my curiosity. So I talk about different animals, I talk about different things in history, so on and so forth. But the reason why I got a following initially was because I was on some reality show called The Bachelor in Paradise.
Oh, really?
I know.
Oh my gosh! I didn't know I was in
the.
No, it's not like I didn't know I was in the company of someone famous.
No. I don't even like to use the word famous, just because it's like.
Did you make it to the final rose ceremony?
I made it to the third, so I was in third place, they call it. Yeah, so I did that.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
No, I actually like when people don't know me from the Bachelor world, because it means that I have turned my page into like what my true passion is, and I like when that is more so reflected in how you know me, as opposed to kissing on a reality show, right? So, so that's kind of how I got my initial following. And I tricked all my followers into hearing animal facts, So I'm like, yeah. But that's how it all started.
Okay. And so what do you do today? Like, you're still in that science, social media, education world?
I am, yeah. So I do that like on a couple different platforms. I had a podcast called Little Curiosities, where I just talk about anything that sparks my curiosity. And I just do things on Instagram and TikTok, and I just try to tell people about what I'm interested in, because I learn about this stuff on my own anyways, and now I can just rant to people on social media about just things that are just fun. And
we should talk about hunting on your podcast.
Yeah, honestly, it is such an interesting subject. I recently went to the Schwein Museum in Germany. And a huge part of it was talking about hunting wild boar. And I had no idea, like, the whole world of like wild boar, like taking over the world, and how hunting's tried to combat that until I went to that museum. So just the history about how hunting began in different areas, how certain animals were like stalked in America or different countries. It's just so cool. So there is so much to know about it. Yeah.
So give me a little bit of an idea of your perspective of, you gave us a little bit of like, I didn't used to eat meat, and now I'm starting to eat meat more. Tell me a little bit about that background. Like, why did you choose not to eat meat? Did you grow up in a household, I assume, that didn't hunt? Dad didn't hunt?
Yeah, so growing up, I was never around hunting. I think the only thing, if you can consider fishing hunting, I used to go deep sea fishing with my grandfather when we were in Florida. And so he would catch things like swordfish or like flounder, like different kinds of fish. And so I grew up around that. But no, I was never, I did do a lot of like hiking and exploring as a kid, and I would collect skulls and collect things like that, but I never hunted myself. And but I've always loved animals, and I became pescatarian mainly because I was against factory farming and against abusing animals in that way. I used to eat meat when I was traveling to different countries just because that's not how they source their protein. That's not how they source their meat. A lot of the times was not from factory farming. So I kind of justified it in that way. And then since moving to Germany, there's just a lot more, I believe, reputable ways to get meat. So I made it more of a regular thing in my diet. So I made a huge shift recently. This is a fairly recent thing. So
yeah, I love Germany. I spent a year there when I was very, very young. And the thing that struck me the most was like the house that I lived in. Literally the day before I got there had 22 rabbits, and they took all 22 rabbits down to the butcher, and the butcher butchered them. And they had fresh rabbit in the freezer, right? And the butcher shop had all sorts of animals, all sorts of animal parts that you can get. And all those animals were probably they were all locally sourced from just little farms, little hamlets all around. It was amazing.
Yeah, butchers are a really big deal here. Same thing with bakers. Like on every corner, there's a butcher.
Oh, bakers. German bakers. Yeah. German bread. Oh my God.
German bread is like, can't be compared to any other bread that I've tried anywhere. And I eat so much of it. I eat way too much German bread. But it's interesting you talk about rabbits because I have a girlfriend who is a part of a program where she raises rabbits, and then she has families come visit on I don't know any other better way to say this, like slaughtering day? I don't know if that's the right word. Yeah. So, but their kids are a part of it. So it's kind of a way to have, good quality meat, but also have their children understand where that meat comes from and be a part of the process of raising the animal, and then being able to be nourished by that animal. And I think it's actually a really cool, I want to be, when I move back to America, when I get back to America, I want to take part in like one of those days just to kind of, just see it face to face, because I think the thing that I fear the most about eating meat is that it's faceless. Like, I don't want meat to ever be faceless. I would like it to be something that you look at the chicken wings on your plate that I had for dinner tonight, and you say, that came from a chicken. And you have to remember that came from a chicken. It's not like some, just meat that's like on like this magical bone that came from, you never know where it comes from. So I like knowing that it came from an animal. And so when some people tell me like, oh, I don't like eating meat on the bone, I'm like, why? Is it because it takes away the fact that it used to be living? Like I don't understand that. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good reminder to know where your food comes from, to know it comes from something living.
Yeah, look, and it's probably the most hypocritical thing that we deal with on social media is that someone would go, oh my God, I can't believe you killed that animal. I can't believe you're posing with that animal. Why don't you just, well, I'll just leave it at that. And I'll be like, well, the whole animal's going to be eaten, right? So would you prefer the picture just to be like the animal completely fleshed out, all the meat just sitting there, and you take a photo with all the meat?
Yeah, it takes away the life of it, right? It takes away the fact that it was an animal. And I think with taxidermy, the thing that really upsets people is that it looks like the animal, right? And it looks like almost alive, but it's not. It's like that uncanny valley sort of thing where it's like, oh, it is alive, but it's not. And I'll admit, it's hard for me to see pictures of animals that have been shot, but I try to remind myself that that's where your food comes from. And I think it's important to show the message of seeing it. And you can't be desensitized to the fact that like this big slab of pink that's on your plate is just you can't like separate the two. I don't think that can exist. So
well, I think a lot of people do separate it. I think the fact that, I think you're hitting on a good point here. The hypocritical nature of someone saying, go to the grocery store and buy your meat is because they have no idea, and they've probably been sanitized away from the idea of death and the idea of that thing was alive once. You have no idea how it died. You have no idea how it lived, actually. Yet you're perfectly comfortable eating that McDonald's hamburger. And don't get me wrong, I love a Big Mac, and but I'm also very careful. I completely understand where my food comes from, where my meat comes from. My kids, when they sit on the table, and I say, "What are you eating?"
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, Dad, it's deer, right?" "Yes, it is." "Okay, great. Where did it come from?"
Mm-hmm.
"You killed it, Dad." "Yep,
Mm-hmm.
I did. And I processed it, and I cut it, and that steak, I cooked it." Everything we know everything about that thing.
Right. Mm-hmm. And factory farms just aren't like that. And I do think the interesting thing is that the animal name and then the meat name also kind of disassociates it with the living creature itself. So ham versus pig, poultry versus chicken, like beef versus
I've never
cow.
thought about that.
It kind of takes away the animal element of the food that you're eating. And I did a little bit of research on that. And I think the reason is because when there were people, there were like the rich noble class, and they would call the food by its meat name, while the people who would hunt it and provide it for them and cook it would, it would be like the animal name in that sense. But it was a way to kind of separate like the noble class from the people who would prepare the meal for them. Yeah, but I also think it just takes away, again, it like takes away the face of what you're eating. So
did you when you were is it an appropriate assumption to say you weren't a vegetarian, you said you were a pescatarian?
I was vegetarian for a dare for like a week. My friend's like, "You can't be vegetarian." And I was like, "I bet I can." And then I was pescatarian after that, because I was running track and cross country in college, and I got injured, and I was like, I need to change my diet somehow, because I can't just like eat like copious amounts of food like I used to if I'm not running for hours a day. And part of that was becoming pescatarian. So it started as a health thing for me. And of course, when you tell people you're pescatarian, vegetarian, you always have the conversation of it being more of an empathetic choice. And so I think that was what initially got me thinking about the empathy behind that. And I've always been an animal lover. And so you kind of like take on that role because, people are telling you you're being a kind person because you're not eating meat, and people do have the empathy behind it. So I think when I started eating meat again, there was like a huge guilt behind it, because I felt like it wasn't just for me, it was for like all these other living creatures. And that's when I decided to learn more about hunting and to learn more about where meat comes from, and how it could be a positive thing for like the environment and conservation in general. Just because I almost had to justify it to myself. So
no, 100%, 100%. Let me ask this: whilst you were a pescatarian or whilst you were at college and whatnot, did you have a perspective on hunting?
Yes. Honestly, I grew up thinking hunting was evil. I definitely did. And I think it's because I wasn't around it. And I also feel like it's because it's easy to see death of something that you see as so beautiful. And I've always had a huge passion for animals. And you see it as sad. How can you not see it as sad? But yeah, I think I had a case where I changed my mind the more that I learned about it.
Yeah, the more you were educated, the more aware of the situation you became, the more you could understand it. And I think we get that a lot. We get a lot of people like, "Oh, I had no idea."
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. Similar sort of scenario as how I engaged you. You said something on Paul Rossoli's post. And I think it was the fish. I don't know if it was hunting related, but it was more like he needed to kill some fish because he hadn't eaten for 3 days. And people were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did." And you're like, what else is he going to do? And where else are you going to get like the freshest understanding of where food comes from? And, well, one, I appreciated you saying something. Again, that's what we do on those big platforms. We're gonna step in, and we're gonna say something. I'm not afraid of the backlash that we get, because we don't really causing any angst. We're not coming in calling people names or calling people snowflakes or liberals or whatever. People tend to use inflammatory language on social media. Rather, it's more like, hey, I get that you hate hunting. I get that you dislike the idea of someone killing something. But here's some facts.
Mm-hmm.
Here's some thoughts that you may want to consider. And you just go back and forth. And most often, sometimes I get like, oh, thank you. Or, wow, I've never had such an intellectual debate with someone on social media.
Yeah.
Sometimes it ends up in me being called all sorts of names under the sun, and that's fine. Because I know that, like your comment on Paul's post, how many people read it?
Oh, I think it froze for a little bit.
That's okay. That's okay.
But that has happened to me too. With collecting taxidermy and showing my taxidermy collection. And I always do source all my taxidermy from like secondhand or food spoilage.
You're not picking up roadkill and making your own taxidermy?
I would do that. And I have collected roadkill before. So don't put it past me. But, I collect dead things, that I find in nature all the time. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people assume, evil or negativity when they're faced with death, which is interesting. I think a lot of other cultures are more comfortable around the idea of death, and more comfortable around the idea that, yeah, you get your food from living things. Where else are you going to get it? Like, it's not going to be neatly packaged in this perfect little thing for you all the time. You don't grow a hamburger on a vine. So I always think it's so interesting when they see the most natural form of how humans initially got meat, like way back when, and even now. And they're almost like, oh my gosh, like this, how dare you show this? When that's natural. It's like we're almost separating ourselves from nature. And I think a lot of the vegan argument is, well, we're not a part of nature. We have grocery stores. We have all this stuff. Like, why would you hunt? You don't need to eat meat. But it's like, at what point do you say it's okay to like separate yourself from nature? Like, why are we so desperate to get away from that? It's almost like we see ourselves above like all the other animals, or not a part of that system that's so savage. And so, we're above that. And I almost feel like, well, we're animals, and I'm proud to be an animal, and I'm proud to have the ability to eat vegetables and fruit and meat. I'm like an omnivore. I'll eat all of it. That's what my body was designed to do. So,
yeah. No,
yeah.
I appreciate everything you're saying. I think I say it a lot. I say we are not a part of nature. We are a part of nature. It's that,
Exactly.
And when you start hunting, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people take away from it, is that, the difference between hunting and hiking is that hiking, you almost just like moving through a system. You've got like this, like, I'm going there. You're not really a part of it. Whilst when you're hunting, all of a sudden you move from being an observer of nature to a participant in her. And you are starting to start thinking about winds and smells and noises, and what does that mean, and how do I interpret this, and how do I interpret that? And you're almost, for a lack of a better definition of hunting, it's almost like, you're just reconnecting with her, with Gaia. And it's like, this is what you're a part of. This is what you've been a part of for millions and millions and millions of years. And that's why now when you drive down the road and you look at a field, you don't just look at a field and go, oh, there's a field. You look at a field and go, oh, I bet you a deer's going to come out that corner at about 5:30 tonight, and I would put a stand right there, and this is what I would do.
That's so interesting, because I almost feel like we're so detached from that. And when I did make that promise to myself that I would have the experience of hunting, though I'm not sure what kind of form of hunting that's going to be. I don't know what I'll be able to do. But that's the exact thing that I want to experience when I actually go and do that, because I feel like that connection is so important. What would you recommend as someone who's never hunted before? What would you recommend I begin with? Only because it almost feels weird to put some sort of hierarchy over, well, you don't want to hunt something big so you feel too guilty. You almost want to hunt a bird or like something smaller. But like, again, you're like, does that make that animal any more or less important?
No, it doesn't.
So what's your advice with that?
It doesn't. And, people will, they get all mixed up and get all, get things in a knot about like, what should I hunt? How should I hunt it? Whatnot. It all depends on your situation and your circumstance. So you're in Germany right now, right?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Where in Germany are you?
Stuttgart, Germany. So kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I actually spent the year of my life that I spent in Germany was in a little town called Erbach im Odenwald, which is it's halfway between Frankfurt and Stuttgart. It's about 30 kilometers northeast of Heidelberg.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're so close. And I love Heidelberg. It's a beautiful, cute town. But
so Erbach, Michelstadt, Bad König, those are all the little towns that I frequented for about a year in my life.
Your pronunciation's on point. It's so difficult for me to pronounce German.
Ich bin doch Deutsch. Aber ich kann mal ein bisschen vom hessischen Akzent. Ich liebe dich, kind of, put the ish down.
Entschuldigung, ich nicht gut Deutsch sprechen. Sprechen Sie English?
You're doing well. How long have you been there?
I've been here almost a year, actually, coming up in December. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so there is a bunch of, I would say, there's probably a bunch of roe deer hunting around you. There's probably a bunch of pig hunting around you.
Yes. I just saw some wild boar, actually, recently.
But it is difficult because typically in Germany, it's all private. It's private clubs that are doing all the hunting. Yeah. I'm not up to snuff on bird hunting in Germany, pheasant hunting or whatnot, but it's all about who you know and connections that can be made to getting, you out and taking your first. Pheasant hunting is great. I would always encourage someone who's going hunting for the first time to do it with someone, because and really take
me with a gun by myself.
Well, it's more the social aspect of it rather than anything.
No, I agree with you. I do agree with you. No one should trust me with a gun by myself in the wild right now. I'm not trained enough. I do need help.
But the social aspect allows you to really enjoy it and talk to someone and say, hey, what's going on? What's this? What's that kind of scenario? You can get that in a deer stand too, like a high stand that they would stick you on, and deer would be driven past you and pigs would be driven past you. It's a lot more challenging in terms of shooting because you're trying to hit something that's moving. But they would put training into you in terms of moving targets. But yeah, a pheasant hunt is something that's very germane. It's very again, it's trying to separate yourself from death or integrate yourself with death. A bird is totally different than a deer. And you will experience different emotions, I think you would.
Oh, 100%.
Of a bird versus a deer.
I don't know if I'm deer level yet. I feel like, it's so difficult because I spend so much time researching these animals. And I almost feel like the more that it's almost like the more you know about it and you see the fate, you can't help but have an emotional connection. So I almost feel like I would go on the field and I'd be out there and I'd have the moment and I would chicken out. And that's something that, I feel like I battle with just because it hasn't been something that I've been around.
Yeah, getting into hunting is not easy. There is a very high barrier of entry. And most often it's tied to where you live and the circumstances by which you can hunt. I do have a really cool chick in Denmark who's a really cool hunter.
Yeah?
And Denmark's not too far away. You could just catch a speed train up there.
Yeah.
She's awesome. And she hunts everything. And what she just did was she just she took like 200 pheasants and took it to like the main square of Denmark, to like the farmer's market, and had a bunch of kids plucking and taught them how to like, this is where your food comes from.
That is
boys
so
and girls. This
cool.
is how you do it. Here's how you, and in front of, like, she did multiple classes. But in the middle of
I would
freaking,
love
you know,
that. I'd love to be
Copenhagen.
part of that.
Yeah.
I think it's so important. I think it's so important, especially like when I have children, I 100% want to have them be a part of something like that. Just because, I mean, it was so separate from me for such a long time. And I feel like when you introduce a child to that early on, just like when you have a pet hamster and that's their first experience with death, like really understanding that, I think, is crucial to being a human. So you can feel more a part of nature as opposed to like an observer of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool, though. I would love to have that contact. I would love to go to one of those classes, like the plucking classes.
Yeah, she's
Definitely.
awesome, man. Her name's Meta. She's in, as I said, she's in Denmark, and she just had her first baby, and like she's taking her baby everywhere when she hunts, and
on the backpack or something.
Yeah. There's another girl. If you want to follow a really cool woman hunter, in the US, her name is Becca Garris.
Becca Garris.
Begagarris. She's got two small girls, and she takes them. She's a traditional bow hunter, so she like Robin Hood bow and arrow.
Okay. Oh, and wow, that's hard.
She hunts like, she just killed a doe when she took, I think her oldest is like 4. And she told the 4-year-old, just stay here in the wood line, and she crept up the wood line and shot a doe, and the 4-year-old like watched where the deer went, and she said, Mom, it's over there. But has been literally on her back since birth, and she's been hunting with her.
You know what's so interesting about that comparison is that hunting for, like, oftentimes mother deer will keep their baby in a bush while they go get food and like do their business. So it's almost like she was replicating that. She had her child wait while she went to get food. You know? So,
yeah, she's a cool chick, man. You just need to need to watch her and follow her. She's a big homesteader, and you know, she's got big vegetable gardens every year and whatnot. But her deal is trad bow, and she kills squirrels and deer and whatever she can, and they cook it and eat it and all the rest of it.
I'll definitely look her up. Something I'm curious about is so I know that hunting in certain areas that have like strict regulations, or I guess there's like a whole balance, and you have the I guess there's like a license you get, and there's like a certain amount that you can kill, and then a certain amount, like people, it's almost like a raffle or something, or like a lottery, right? So in other areas, like you said you're going to be going to Africa, how do you feel like those areas are keep to those regulations, or do you feel like sometimes because there's money coming in, and I understand I understand that certain communities like need to have like the economics of hunting and need to have that money and revenue coming in. Do you feel like sometimes they might have too many of those licenses in order to get that revenue, or what's your opinion on that?
So it's a multifaceted answer. So let me start like this. In America, you have to buy a license. On that license sometimes comes a number of tags. The tags are what you are allocated to take. In some states, you have to buy a license and a tag. And so when you have to buy a license and a tag, that means there's limited opportunities. There's limited tags. Like on my license in Mississippi, there's 8 deer. I can take 8 deer on my license. And there's 8 tags associated with it. If I go to Colorado and I want to hunt an elk, I buy a license and I buy an elk tag. I've only got 1 tag, and it's over the counter. There's certain other places in Colorado that I can't buy a tag. I have to put in for a lottery, like you said. And if I don't get drawn this time, I get a preference point, which means that next year I get 2 chances of going into the lottery. And there's places in the United States that people are waiting 30, 35 years to draw a tag.
Wow. Because it's so competitive.
It's competitive, but it's also they're trying to sustain a certain quality or quantity of animals. And so scientifically, they are justifying we only have 20 tags every year. And there's 20,000 people wanting those 20 tags.
Right.
Because they're so incredible. The animals are incredible from a quality perspective, typically is what the lottery is tied to. So now let's move to the African example. In Africa, you have both systems as well. But let's start with South Africa. South Africa in 1977 privatized wildlife, i.e. Kendall Long, if you own 5,000 hectares in South Africa, and the wildlife that is on those 5,000 hectares, it's yours. It's private. It belongs to you. America, it's a public model. The resource, the animals, the wildlife belong to the state. They belong to the people. In South Africa, they belong to the private individual who owns the land. So there's not really a tag license system for you, Kendall Long, and your property. Mm-hmm. Can Kendall Long decide this year, I'm going to kill every single animal on my property to make money? The answer is yes.
Interesting.
But you have no animals left for next year to make money. So you have to remember that animals, wildlife, and this may be a little crass, sort of monetizing wildlife this way, but this is the way that you got to think about it. They have now a value, and they are an economic asset. And when if you know anything about economics, you want to grow your economic asset. And so your wildlife, you want to grow it. And so there's two ways to do that in South Africa. One is have enough area, build up your herd to a point where you're just taking the cream off of the top of the butter. You just your sustainable offtake is the animals that are going to die anyway. You're just taking them off, and you're getting people to pay you to take them off. And it just keeps doing that, right? The population keeps bumping up. You keep taking the top, bump up, take the top, bump up, take the top. Others will take more than the top, say 20%, 30%, 40%, and then they'll buy animals from someone else and put them back on their property for next year. Mm-hmm. That's the typical South African scenario. Now move out of South Africa into more wilderness, more Africa, dare I say Africa, where the areas aren't owned by anybody. They are owned by the government. And so the state controls the land, the state controls the wildlife. And in that scenario, science drives the number of animals that you have on quota, i.e., the survey says you've got 10,000 buffalo in your 1 million acre area. We're going to give you 40 buffalo tags. Typically, it's almost like either between a 1 to 5% of the quota of the total population is given in quota. In addition to that, there's an animal, specificity. So those 40 buffalo tags have to be males. Okay. Sometimes they even say you cannot shoot those males in a herd. So they have to have separated from the herd already, which means they're even older. So there's lots of different regulations, but I think to the crux of the matter of what you're saying, there's no hunting outfitter anywhere in the world that is going to do harm through the practice of hunting to the population itself because of it being an economic asset in the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That makes sense?
No, it definitely does. And because I feel like every year there's a story that comes up where somebody had hunted, I forgot who it was, where there was a guy who had hunted a lion that was a favorite for a safari because it was brought out. So
Cecil the lion, the thing that essentially changed the life of social media hunting forever.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I think that the more people see it, it's difficult not to feel empathy for the animals that you see. And without understanding the background of it and without understanding all the nuances that go into that on both sides.
Yep.
You're going to react with raw emotion, which is what I experience, you experience probably all the time on social media. I saw a documentary by Louis Theroux. He's like one of my favorite documentarians.
Love Louis Theroux. Big dude.
Did you see that documentary that he did about big game hunting?
The one in South Africa where he went warthog hunting? Yeah, it was great.
What was it, the one that he went warthog hunting?
Yeah, he went with a family, and the family was like, this is why we're hunting. They came out from Ohio and stuff like that. It was good.
No, I think there was another one that he did where he was hiding inside of, like, by a watering hole.
Yep, that's the same one.
That is the same one. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then maybe I forgot the specifics.
No, it's great. And he had the opportunity, and he said, no, I don't want to do it.
Exactly. So that was a documentary that really started to open my eyes up about, like, the big game hunting and about why certain communities do it. And I also learned a lot more about it when I went to Madagascar recently, because a huge problem for the lemur conservation was people, and poaching is different than hunting. That they're
100%.
two completely different things.
It's like calling shopping and shoplifting the same thing.
Yes, so completely different things. I definitely want to specify that. But the communities that do get these animals, you have to understand, are trying to survive, are trying to provide for their families. And the reason for, like, having people come and do that is because in the documentary with Louis Theroux, all the animals are, like, the meat is shared with the communities there. And part of the money goes to the communities there.
It depends. Again, it depends, right? In different parts of Africa, different parts of the world, different proportions of the money go back to the community. South Africa, it's your own private place. There's no the only, benefit to communities is the meat, as you mentioned, like Louis Theroux, the employment, maintaining habitats, that kind of stuff. But in, like, Mozambique, I think the law is 33% of all trophy fees go back to the community. In Namibia, 100% of the trophy fees go back to the Game Animal Trust Fund in Namibia. Tanzania, I think it's like 25% to 55%. It just depends, what area, what revenue sharing is given back to the community.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I have difficulty with the trophy hunting is when it's animals that are carnivores, because from what I understand, eating the meat of a carnivorous animal is actually toxic.
False.
Or it's bad for you. Is that false?
False.
Okay, I'm curious to learn more about that. So where did that come from?
I have no idea. It's the first time I've heard of it.
Really?
Yeah. Mountain lion meat, alpha predator in the United States, probably the best tasting meat. I've never tasted it, but supposedly a lot of people say it's the best tasting meat in North America.
Interesting, because from what I've heard, the closer to the source of, like, vegetation, the better in terms of the meat. Like, the more it's kind of goes down the line, the energy goes down the line, the worse the meat is for you.
I can see that argument, but unless you've tasted it, it's. I've heard leopard is fantastic.
Interesting.
I think that there may be a little bit of an association. I don't know why this is coming into my brain. Lions and leopards specifically in Africa, are around a lot of decaying, rotting flesh, and if you're not careful with the animal and meat and whatnot, you may have, toxoplasmosis sort of issues coming through. But I've never heard of anybody, and I've never heard the rhetoric that it's bad or toxic for humans to eat. The problem is, really the crux of the problem is, for every other animal in Africa, let's talk about one thing first. You can't take the meat away in Africa when you go and hunt it. If you're local to South Africa, you can. You absolutely can. You've got a lot of hunters that do that. But an American or a German coming to hunt in Africa cannot take the meat home with them. whether it's a giraffe, a warthog, a zebra, a buffalo, you can't take the meat home. And so people are like, well, if you can't take the meat home, you must be just there for the trophy. Yes and no. If you could take the meat home, how many people would be taking the meat home? I think a lot, because it's so good. Predators, a lot of people say, well, you don't eat predators anyway. Nobody eats predators anyway. So what's the point in shooting them? It must be just for hunting. It must be for just the trophy on the wall.
Yeah.
Then again,
and that's
it
what's
depends.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's difficult for me to get behind so much so if it's not for the eating aspect of it or not for the hunting for your family or to have food. Like, that's where I'm like, then why?
Perfectly.
Why?
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question. Okay. So some communities will eat it. Some communities will eat the leopard. Some communities will eat the lion. For the majority, though, I don't think they do. I'll be honest. So then let's say why. And here's where the difficulty in things lie. And this is how I always talk about it. And I'll use Kendall Long as an example. Not that Kendall Long would do this. Okay.
Oh, no. All these haters going to soundbite. Kendall hunts lions.
Nah. Then I'll change it. You know, a big, rich, white American decides he wants to go to Africa and he wants to kill a lion. I can't do anything about the motivation of that individual for why he wants to hunt. I can't do anything about it. It could be for conservation. You're like, oh, Robbie, that doesn't make any sense. Why would he kill a lion for conservation? Well, there's another individual who says, I just want to do it because I think it's a manly thing to do. I think it's bristle up and I'm a big man because I killed a lion. Okay, great. Yeah, doesn't sit well with a lot of people. But let's just take a step back and let's think about what happens beyond the activity of the actual shot and the lion dying. So what happens as an implication of that hunt, an implication of someone hunting a lion, regardless of the motivation of that individual? The implications and the benefits are the lion hunt typically is probably one of the most expensive hunts you can do in Africa. In Tanzania, it's probably $100,000 to $120,000 hunt.
Dang, it's like a down payment.
It's a down payment. Okay. If lions weren't hunted in these areas, there'd be so much more animals would need to be taken to fulfill that financial gap. So it's a very big financial incentive, and it's only one lion a year, maybe two lions in a 1 million acre block or 3 million acre block. That really is the foundation for anti-poaching, saving tens of thousands of pieces of wildlife, heads of wildlife, protecting millions of acres of habitat. Who knows you're a scientist, who knows the biodiversity of vegetation, of butterflies, of insects, of reptiles being protected because of the money that's being generated because of that one lion to substantiate the whole entire operation. That money also then goes to schools, building schools, renovating schools, school supplies. It goes to building a medical facility that serves a village that's never had medical access in their lives before. The closest medical access is 9 hours walk away. All of a sudden, it's like, I get the fact that you hate the idea of a lion being shot.
Mm-hmm.
But the benefits and consequences of that action, and here's the other thing, it has no detriment to the lion population at all. Actually, it's growing more lions in the future. So if we're growing more lions, if the population is stable, if the population is increasing, if you're getting these employment benefits, these financial benefits, the medical benefits, the school benefits, the habitat benefits, the wildlife benefits, both non-game and game, what's so bad about it?
Here's a question. If hunting was illegal, just say in these reservations, all of a sudden you snap your fingers and it's illegal, they're not allowed to do it. What happens?
Hundreds of lions get killed.
And that's something that I was actually really interested in finding out, because these animals are protected and kept alive in these like protected areas, in these enclosures for hunting and for other things. And it's almost like it's so difficult to have that conversation in your mind of killing these animals is protecting them.
100%.
And killing these animals is providing so much for so many people, like you just said.
You have to get out of your brain the sort of individualistic, and that's where the animal rights live. The animal rights people live in a line 1, line 2, line 3, versus an ecological view or landscape view that is, we're looking at the population writ large of lions. And so if hunting was banned in Tanzania, and that's why we fight so hard. So if lion hunting was banned, let's just take this a little bit further. Lion hunting was banned, which means then the big ticket item, the $150,000 item in these big concessions is gone now. Can't hunt lions anymore. Or indirectly, you can't import lions anymore back into the United States or Germany. And so why would someone come hunt a lion any longer? That is because they are looking for the memory. They're looking for the rug on the wall or the mount or whatnot. So whatever they want. But they're not doing it any longer because someone says it's not good. And so we've banned it. Those operators have typically 10-year lease agreements with the governments, most often all across Africa. In Tanzania alone, some of those agreements are $250,000 a year for just the lease of the concession. That's before a single person has hunted. You're forking out $250,000 every year. And you've got a very short hunting season. And so you have to make your money in 120, 150 days. And then that's it. You're not allowed to hunt anymore. And so remove the big ticket item. A lot of these guys will be like, we're out.
Yeah.
We cannot afford to do this any longer. Well, then someone would say, well, Robbie, ecotourism will take over. No problems. Ecotourism operator will come in there. No, they won't. Because they can't afford it. There's no tourist in their right mind going to spend $20,000 on a charter flight into these areas to see animals that are in low density. There's not a lot of them, and they're spread out over 2 million acres versus just go, a drive out of Dar es Salaam 2 hours and you can see the big 5 and do 2 or 3 days and you're out of there. So it can't be changed to ecotourism. So then what happens? Well, because there's nobody patrolling anymore, nobody protecting the area anymore, people are going to move in. And they're going to bring their livestock in. It's great grounds. It's been great grounds. It's been protected. It's been restored. It's great grass. It's great trees to cut down for good firewood. You can make coal. You can sell coal. Well, the lions aren't good for business because lions eat cattle. They eat goats and stuff. So we're just going to get rid of the lions. We'll just poison the water. Or we'll let them take a cow. We'll let them take a cow, and then we'll poison the cow. And then we'll take them out. We'll take the pride out. No problems. And they don't care. No, because I wouldn't care either. Because they're destroying something of my livelihood, right? So that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what's difficult to understand as well. When I was in Madagascar, that was something that we heard a lot, is that you help the people and that helps the nature. That helps these natural spaces. And I feel like for me, it's like I dislike it, but I understand why it exists and I can respect why it exists. And I can see that what this talk is kind of proving to me is that it's so much more complicated than just saying, I don't want to kill these animals. I don't want lions being killed. I don't want, elephants being killed. It's too easy to say that and to not understand everything that comes with it. Because as soon as you make it illegal, as soon as you create that goal of making it so people can't do it anymore, you're almost doing the opposite. Mm-hmm. You're almost then kind of signing a death sentence to all these other animals. And that's so difficult to understand, like not being a part of a world like that, or not understanding like people's livelihoods and people needing to survive, and like what funds keeping these animals alive and why they're able to thrive. Do you feel like if there weren't these spaces that are being protected, and if it was kind of just like open, like all of it was nature, all of it was wildlife, no one owned anything, do you feel like it would just be kind of a mass extinction of all these big animals?
I think you'd see a lot of habitat loss. I think you'd see a lot of habitat connectivity being removed. I think you'd have pockets of animals surviving, pockets of wildlife, but not in the numbers and not in the diversity that these areas are protecting. And that's just talking about the big game that you see, right? Again, all the flowers and the insects and the bugs and the butterflies and the bird species, the reptile species, all of those are sort of umbrellaed under this care package that is because of big game animals being hunted. Africa is the fastest growing human population in the world. It's going to probably top 3 to 4 billion by 2050 alone. And so the pressure on wildlife and the pressure on habitat is immense. It's Europe. It's like Germany was, 500 years ago. It's just that Africa's going through it right now. And so we want to, I want to use every single tool in the toolbox to save wildlife for my kids, for my grandkids, for your kids one day. And why would you be opposed to one tool in the toolbox that is essentially right now protecting double, in Africa specifically, double the amount of land that the national park system in Africa protects? Double. You're talking like 1.8 million square kilometers of habitat being protected by hunting. So I think you want to use every single tool at your disposal in your toolbox. Yes. Does hunting have a sort of higher moral compass that it needs to hold itself to because the fact that we are taking life, that we are killing animals? Absolutely. 100%. When animal populations are on a decline and you can see it as a hunter or a hunting outfit, you need to stop hunting. Or you need to reduce your quota by, you want to get that population back. And even if that means, putting a moratorium on yourself, say, well, we're not hunting. We're not hunting X or Y because X and Y cannot sustain any more offtake. And that happens too. Again, these kinds of stories just have never been told out of the hunting community. Right.
And I think it's almost taboo to talk about it and to support it because you immediately get that emotional response, which is understandable. I can understand why people would have an immediate emotional response to certain animals that I feel like we kind of put up on a pedestal. From one thing that I've learned from, do you watch that account, Nature's Metal?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever seen that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So one thing that I've learned from that and from all the studying that I've done is that, nature wants to survive, right? And it gets crazy. And, I think not seeing it for what it is, it makes it so we kind of see ourselves as different than it. But if you see all of the savagery that happens in the animal kingdom, you're almost like, I don't even know where I'm going, but it's just so interesting to kind of make the parallel of how we see it as this innocent thing that can't be touched and should only be and
let's just roll on top of that the Disneyfication of wildlife too, right? That doesn't help either.
Yeah.
And so I've never heard anyone talk about, oh my gosh, look at that impala that got killed, right? It's like, or a deer. Nobody cares about a deer. Nobody cares about an impala. Rarely do people think about an elk or a pig. But talk about a bear, talk about a lion, talk about an elephant, all the things that have like these huge, deep, spiritual, human, emotional tie-ins to things that you've seen on your TV, right? You've got Dumbo the elephant, you've got the Lion King, you've got Winnie the Pooh, you've got Smokey the bear, you've got Yogi the bear. All these things have built, a sort of an anthropomorphic model of what these animals are supposed to be like.
I was just thinking that. It's so true. We push so much of how we view things onto other creatures when in reality, that's just not how it works out there. It's not how it works out in the wild.
Yeah, but, it's funny. It's really, you say that because one of the things, obviously, that the animal rights side lives in is that's this idea of pain. And that, when you hunt something, you're causing immense pain on that animal and distress on that animal. And I've always try to think, I take a step back and I'm like, they do have pain receptors, just like we do. But do they translate pain the same way that we do? Does it translate in the same way? Like pain to us is, has has some sort of resonance within your soul, has a memory to it. It has all these kinds of things. It's bad. Pain is bad. Are all those same things in the animal kingdom? And you hear a dog whimper and you're like, oh, it must be in pain. But then you see a white-tailed deer walking around without a backstrap because a freaking golden eagle took it out. It's not whimpering. It's not walking like it's sad. It's just like you said, nature wants to survive.
Right.
And is it painful? Maybe. According to, neurological text, the pain receptors must be emitting some sort of something to elicit pain. But we've never been able to talk to a deer. We've never been able to talk to a lion. We've never been able to talk to a bear to say, what is that really?
It is so interesting. I've actually been reading this book called An Immense World, where it talks about different animals, how different animals use senses in different ways and how they see the world completely differently than humans do. And it's hard to say, because if you measure things by neurons or receptors, lobsters feel like twice as much as humans do if you're going to measure it in that way. We eat them all the time. We boil them alive all the time. And you can argue whether that's, humane or not. But it's a common thing we eat. And science has proved they have way more neurons firing off than we do. So, or neurons collectively on them than we do. So it's difficult to say how animals feel things. And it's so natural to anthropomorphize things and to say that they must feel the same way we do. They must do this the same way we do. Humans, just to say how different humans are than something like an elephant, we rely so heavily on eyesight. It's in our language, it's in everything that we do. Eyesight is so powerful and strong. But for an elephant, they can feel vibrations in the ground that humans aren't capable of feeling, that other animals aren't capable of feeling. They rely on smell so much stronger than we can ever imagine. And every single, our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, everything is so vastly different from species to species. It's impossible to say how they experience pain and how they experience the world and how they understand these things are happening. And we also have the luxury of having more of a cushy, lifestyle. And I think in that sense, we lose a lot of what it means to be wild and what it means to put your body through certain things. Anybody who's, gone camping can say that, that's, it's hard out there. It's difficult. But that's every day for an animal,
Yep.
That measure of pain is relative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even between people, pain is completely different. Like the way I experience pain is different than how you experience pain based off the you know, my experiences through life and how like I've slowly, you know, had pain and like, you know, built up pain throughout my life. So, yeah, if it's that different from person to person, it's vastly different for, you know, animals. And, yeah, but it's easy to see something suffering, see something without knives, see something, you know, like seals without tails, like, gosh, like that's shocking. It is shocking, and I don't like seeing it. I do follow Nature is Metal, but I don't like seeing certain things. But it's just a different world. It's a different, you know. Yeah. We can't relate to it because
I got a good book for you.
Ooh.
What
book is it? I'm gonna write it down.
It's by David Guamen. Quammen. I say this all the time. People listening to this podcast are like, he's on that book again. But it's called Monster of God or Monsters of God.
Okay. Oh.
It's all about alpha predators of the world.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
Brown bears in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, saltwater crocodiles in India, Sri Lanka, Northern Territory of Australia, wolves, Siberian tigers, the lions of India, all those kinds of things. And
is it talking about how they perceive the world, or like how
humans interact with them?
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, it is so crazy to see different stories. I listen to Tooth and Claw podcast. Do you listen to that podcast? Or they're so great. We did like a little collab a little while ago. And they have so many stories of like people surviving like animal attacks and stuff like that. And there's some insane ones with like how tigers will scout out certain individuals and they'll step over, you know, other people because they want to get to that specific person.
Really?
And yeah, like it's crazy like how much thought goes into like why they choose the prey that they do. And yeah, or you know, the story about how a tiger escaped from a cage at a zoo because these kids were taunting him and was out in the zoo and was chasing over these kids specifically and trying to kill them specifically and going past all these others, you know. So they hold grudges.
Jeez.
Yeah, they're very, you know, and it's pretty remarkable. Like it's really remarkable to see like, you know, how advanced they are in terms of like being predators. But you know, I mean, that's what's so cool. It's like I feel like, and you probably know this more than most people who are saying that hunting is bad, you probably have an immense respect for nature and how it is out there because you have to live in that world. You have to use senses that, you know, to get your food that other people take for granted or don't realize that we have anymore. You have to, like you said, like listen, you have to track things. You have to be quiet. It's probably, I mean, I know it's incredibly difficult to finally, get an animal. And I think that's a perspective that is that's unfortunately lost to a lot of people today.
No, you're totally hitting it on the head. You know, some hunts are easy, most hunts aren't, and you know, when you get that animal on the ground, that's really when the work starts because then you have to take care of it and you have to get all the meat off of it and you have to pull it out of the field. And sometimes that's, you know, you can get your truck up to the animal and you can load it up and it's easy. Sometimes it's 10 miles of up and down canyon walking to get the meat out. And yeah, I think a lot of, you know, it may not reflect in social media a lot. But again, I think the vast majority of hunters really, really respect wildlife, really value what they have, and they want others to understand it. And unfortunately, the communication style of hunters are, hey, look at this wonderful animal that I shot. Don't you see it? And everyone goes, oh, that's gross. Why are you taking that picture with the animal the way that you are? And you're like, what? It was an amazing hunt. It was an amazing adventure. This is going to feed my family for the next 3 months. Look. But nobody's seeing all of that. All they're seeing is the dead animal and the guy smiling. And you're like, are you smiling because you like killing that thing? That's why, right? You're a psychopath, right? And there's so much behind it.
Way back when someone brought a kill into their community, that meant survival. That was celebrated.
Yeah.
And if you go down, the grocery store and you pick up like that pre-ground beef, you know how many cows are in that one package of beef? Most people have no idea. There are like hundreds of cows in that one thing of beef. So you can like go to the grocery store and be like, look, I got us like hamburgers for dinner. Everyone like celebrates that. But you have like 100 cows that feed how many people? I don't know. It's just like, it's just such a different story. And it's interesting to see what some people celebrate, what some people see as unacceptable. And it takes knowledge, like it takes research. It takes actually looking for the answers as opposed to just blindly emotionally reacting to things. You always have to ask yourself why and be curious. Like that's the one thing that I try to promote so much is like, be curious. Don't just blindly say something's evil without researching it. And that's what happened with me. And that's why I have so much more of a respect with hunting than I did before, because I asked why and I was open to changing my mind. And I think so many people aren't open to changing their mind. And I think that's what the danger is, because you don't actually see the truth.
I love it. Well, Kendall, I appreciate your time. I know it's late where you are. I appreciate the open-mindedness of you and your exploration and your curiosity.
No, thank you. Thank you. This has been an awesome conversation. And that's why I love being open-minded and curious about things, because it just opens you up to so much more of the world as opposed to kind of living in like this little box of like how you believe things should be. So no, thank you. I appreciate the conversation.
We'll definitely, anytime you have a hunting related question, just DM us, okay? Or
yes.
You're like, I saw
100%.
this. What does this mean? Just DM us, okay?
Yeah. I see a wild boar. No.
Exactly. What do I do? Yeah. Send us a DM.
Exactly. Will do.